but I'm quite certain he voted for it as well. I guess I saw his news release. But I voted for it for a number of reasons. First of all, it is our constitutional responsibility to fund the government, to vote for funding for the government. It is the responsibility of the 113th Congress to fund this year's budget. This was, and I know there's some confusion, I think, perhaps purpose confusion about which budget this is. This is the appropriations for the current fiscal year that we're in, not the next fiscal year. And there are several reasons to vote for it, that I believe. One is to fund the government through the current fiscal year so that we don't have another deadline 2 or 3 months from now and waste a whole bunch of time on another deadline instead of getting about the real business, which is what we call regular order. And that is when we have the reinforcements from the Republicans in the Senate starting in January, we start taking up these appropriations bills one at a time, 12 different appropriations bills, as opposed to these giant omnibus spending bills. And while the House has been doing the one at a time thing, the Senate's been doing these these comprehensive bills. So that one part of it is just a matter of process and getting the deck cleared so that we can get the reinforcements and start on the real issue. The other reason to do it is, frankly, we got Democrats to agree to some things that have their constituents a lot madder than conservatives are at us. As you know, Nancy Pelosi opposed it. Elizabeth Warren opposed it. They didn't like some of the cuts in Obamacare. They didn't like some of the cuts, of course, in EPA and IRS. And so, while not a perfect bill, it needed it to be a bill that the president would sign. It needs to be a bill that the Senate would pass, and passing something that would get vetoed or wouldn't get past the Senate didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. So plus there are some really, like I said, there are some really good things in the bill that we like to talk about. They don't get talked a lot about, Rob, quite frankly. Things like the IRS and EPA cuts and some of the policy riders that do things like defund the IPAB board. The fact that it prohibits the Corps of Engineers from implementing waters of the U.S. on farms and ranches, pretty big stuff, obviously. Blocks Interior Department from making any decisions on naming the greater sage-grouse as endangered species. It blocks the president's attempts to reallocate further energy research funding to green energy, and in fact reallocates more money in the DOE budget back to fossil fuel energy, because if we're going to meet these crazy mandates that the EPA has put on coal, we need to at least be able to research it and make sure that it can do the things that they say it can do. So those are just a few of the things that I think are pretty important policy riders.
701-293-9000 if you want to join the program, 888-970-9329. So this is kind of what I was thinking of, and this is what I was thinking of as I was watching the Senate debate over the weekend, and of course watching the House debate prior to that. Basically, we have had since 2008 a Democrat supermajority in the Congress, where the Democrat leadership in the House and the Senate have been calling the shots. Except for, of course, we picked up the House again in 2010.
Right.
But basically though, they've been calling the shots, and so we have been doing, I guess what I call crisis government, where everything is this constant, everything's packed into one giant bill and everything's got to pass, and it's the choice between this gigantic crap sandwich or shut the government down.
Yeah.
And so essentially what you're saying is this is kind of the last, we've kind of got to get the past out of our system. That's what this vote was just about.
Well,
so
some of it's that, Rob. And first of all, you've described the last several years perfectly. There's no question. But it was a little bit more than that, because one of the things a number of us, and I whipped favorable on this. I whipped a yes. But by the way, what whip means is when the leadership says, "Would you vote for yes or no?" I was a yes on a short-term continuing resolution. But they clearly didn't get enough votes. I think they had enough Republican votes, but there weren't enough votes on the Senate or on the Democratic side or the president's support to pass a short-term continuing resolution. That was my first preference. So, we could have done that, and we would still be there, of course, fighting about it, and the government probably would have shut down, or we would have done something, real short-term until we figured something else out. So that wasn't going to be part of the agenda. But the one thing that we got that's sort of a hybrid between what you've described and what I'm trying to say is the short-term continuing resolution on Homeland Security. So Homeland Security is only funded at current rates, current funding levels until February 27th. Now, you might remember when the CROMnibus, as he called it, and what a weird word, but when that first was presented to us, that was funded, immigration under Homeland Security was funded through March. And we were able at least to get that dialed back to February 27th so that the very first thing that will come up in January with the new Congress will be what to do about the president's immigration overreach. And he only has till February 27th funding to carry it out in the Department of Homeland Security. So that was one of the pretty big victories that we were able to get, and the president agreed to sign the omnibus under that condition, along with several other things. I mean, not funding IPAB. That's what Sarah Palin called the death panels, or call them the rationing panels, or whatever. But they not funding that. That's pretty big stuff. Cutting the IRS back, cutting the EPA back 21% since Republicans took control. So you're right about the comprehensive nature of what Democrats have wanted to do and sort of held us hostage. But the other thing is, and we don't celebrate these victories enough, Rob, while what you describe is true, funding on the discretionary side has actually been reduced, and this was another reduction from last year. Had been reduced almost $500 billion annually since the Republicans took control of the House. So even with just that slight majority in 1/3 of the government, we've been able to rein in spending to some degree, incrementally.
Do you feel like, and this was always because obviously, like I said, we're getting to the point, like you said, a comprehensive bill, and we go right up to the end, and then it's a choice either between this giant comprehensive bill or shutting the government down. Right. But do you feel like, because some of the people have argued that we can't shut the government down, and your opponent in the election we just had, made some accusations about you helping to shut down the government, which of course I know you dispute. But is shutting down the government as big a deal? Because it seems like Republicans got the blame for shutting down the government, and then went on to do pretty well in the midterms. Is it that big of a deal?
From the public perspective, we were bailed out, of course, by the full implementation of the thing that the government was shut down over, and that was Obamacare. And I always did argue, Rob, that wasn't it Lincoln that said the best way to repeal a really bad law is to fully implement it? And the full implementation of Obamacare is what really led to the Republican victories, and I call them Democratic losses more than Republican victories in the last election, because it really is about stopping Barack Obama. And polling supports that to the degree you agree with polling or believe the polling. So while the government shutdown was devastating for Republicans in the public arena, in public opinion, I don't even think that's a disputable issue, but not nearly as devastating as full implementation of Obamacare was. And so to Democrats. And so that's really where we are, is between these two sort of ideologies. And shutting the government down at this point, I don't think would have resonated well with the American public, or certainly even with the North Dakota public. But that's why I think we do have to, though, get back to this regular order where we don't have these giant comprehensive bills. Remember, immigration reform that passed the Senate was another one of those things that my opponent and several other opponents kept trying to make a big issue, that we wouldn't, in the House, take up this comprehensive bill. Well, to which I said, you're welcome. Comprehensive often leads to this kind of thing. They tried to extort a vote in the House over this comprehensive bill in the Senate on immigration reform, and yet the very reason we didn't bring it up is not because we don't want to vote on it, but because we don't support it. And if you bring up immigration reform, which we will do, no doubt, first week we get back in January, we will start to bring it up piece by piece, starting with border security, and then getting on to things like work visas and appropriate, the criteria and whatnot for legal immigration, and then probably after that, what to do about undocumented workers.
701-293-9000, 888-970-9329. My inbox was full of emails from conservative groups after that House vote saying that you would abandon them, that you would abandon the cause, and by the way, give them some money too along the way. Right. But I guess to me as a conservative, I find this very appealing. This idea that we're going to go back to regular order. I don't know what limited government principle is served by funding the government, with these giant bills and these continuing resolutions. I don't know. I feel like I feel that transparency is inherently a conservative principle, in that the regular order process is more transparent, because instead of talking about whether or not we're going to shut down the government, we're talking about the spending that's actually in the bills.
Boy, Rob, you nailed it. So just to give people sort of a backdrop of the last year, because remember, when we agreed to reopen the government and they passed what's known as the Murray-Ryan budget, that was Patty Murray, Paul Ryan, early January. One of the deals in that was that we would go back to regular order. So the House went back to regular order, passed a series of appropriations bills after debating. Now imagine this. I want people to hear this very carefully. 79 hours of debate, not in committee, but on the floor of the House of Representatives on C-SPAN. 79 hours of open debate on the floor, and that includes every amendment, because appropriations in regular order and the House are debated under what's called an open rule. That means any member can bring an amendment to the floor. That's the transparency that is the greatest backstop to problems, frankly, and to fraud. The Senate didn't take up a single one. So they reneged on their half of the deal, their part of the deal. Now with the new Senate, our hope is to have that very open debate on both the House and the Senate. And you're right, and then it's completely transparent. This other process, because even many of us, now Rob, I'll say this, this bill, this omnibus, is 1,603 pages long. And when we had more than a day or two to vote on it, because we had a lot of time in those couple of days, because of course they're not real filled days when you get to this point, to actually read through the bill, and a lot of us did, and a lot of others did, and you're looking for pieces and things that relate directly to your areas of interest and expertise, and it's pretty hard even for a member of Congress to do that, much less for the American public to draw some conclusion from it.
Well, Representative Cramer, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. I got to go to a break.
Always a pleasure.
So.
Thanks for the opportunity, Rob.
Thank you. Kevin Cramer, our congressman. Honestly, I kind of agree. Senator Hoeven, Representative Cramer, a lot of these conservative groups telling me that they voted the wrong way. I don't know that I agree. Anyway, more to come straight ahead, Rob.
And one is what's called NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act. The other is funding government. Then also the tax extender package, which is making sure that the expensing and depreciation and tax credits are in place as people prepare their tax returns here at year end. Very important for our farmers and small business. As a matter of fact, I was down there on the floor talking on it today, and I'm going to continue to do that every day until we get it. And then the last thing is what's called TRIA, which is the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act, and that again is key so that our insurance companies can provide insurance and do it on an affordable basis and have some reinsurance backstop on the terrorism piece. So those are the things that we're trying to get done, and over the weekend we're going back and forth trying to finish. We passed the Defense Authorization Act last week. Over the weekend we're going back and forth trying to get the bill passed that funds the government, and that's what we voted on and approved Saturday night.
Your colleague, Senator Cruz, had a last-minute maneuver, and according to some of the headlines I'm reading an ABC News headline, says Cruz won't apologize for spending bill delays, sort of creating the perception that there's a lot of sniping or a lot of that's actually the word ABC News uses, is sniping, but a lot of criticism for Cruz, even among Republicans. You're quoted in the article. You said, I quote, "I'm concerned that we fight when we can win and get something accomplished, and of course that's what we're trying to get set up for next year when we have the majority in the Senate." So, do you feel that Senator Cruz's fight or maneuver over the weekend, for lack of a better term, do you think that was worth it?
Well, the key is that we, made sure that we didn't have a government shutdown. So, look, I'm trying to do what I can to fight and to block the president's executive action on immigration. That's the wrong thing to do, and we're pushing back. That's what his point of order was about, an effort to try to block what he's doing. So essentially what I'm saying is, look, we've got to push back on the president's executive order. We need to continue to do that. But at the same time, we can't shut down the government. So I think we got as much as we could get in the omnibus. We, in essence, for the Department of Homeland Security, we inserted a short-term continuing resolution, which means it's only funded until February 27th, so about 60 days. And we're going to go back after that funding and see if we can block the president's executive order. And so that's really the work that we're trying to do, as well as making sure that we get these other acts or, the important legislation passed that I described earlier.
That seems to be, and obviously we had a shutdown previously, and that seems to be the big concern about this is we get down to the nitty gritty, we get down to where there's just days, just hours left, and the government is going to shut down unless the Congress passes funding. And obviously the big fear about that from the Republican side is that Republicans get blamed for shutting down the government. But we had a government shutdown, and Republicans seem to have done pretty well in the midterms despite that. Do you think it's still this? Do you think that these fears that the Republican shutdowns hurt Republicans, are those still founded in reality?
Well, see, that's, and this relates to your earlier question about my comment as well. In terms of getting the funding bill passed this year, when we're still a minority in the Senate, we want to do everything we can to try to block the president's action. He clearly exceeded his authority, so we did everything we could to try to block that action on his part, and yet still make sure we didn't have a government shutdown, and try to set things in motion for next year so that we can come back and go to work on that executive order. And that's what I was talking about. That's what we've tried to do. So I, along with others, was trying to block what he did this year. We didn't have enough votes to do it. So what we've set up now is the ability to fight in the Department of Homeland Security's funding and come back and try to find a way to block his executive order and then address immigration reform the right way, which is with a step-by-step approach where we start with enforcing the law and border security.
Talking about Senator Cruz's bill, and it failed by I guess not bill, but I suppose amendment would be.
Point of order is what it's called.
Point of order, okay. He lost 74-22. As I understand it, though, you voted yes for Cloture, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but you voted yes for Cloture, but wrong on the final bill. Can you explain that?
Well, what I voted for was I voted for his point of order in an effort to try to get as much done as we could to block the president's executive order. We were not able to do that. So in the final analysis, I voted for the omnibus because otherwise we have a government shutdown. And we got as much as we could get in it, which is a continuing resolution or a short-term piece on the Department of Homeland Security's part of the omnibus, which enables us to come back after the first of the year and go after that funding to try to address the president's executive order.
And really, the thinking behind that is after the first of the year, we have a new Congress, and that new Congress has Republican majority in the Senate. So you're feeling that gives you a stronger footing to address this issue with, I guess, more of your allies in place and seated in the Senate?
Exactly, Rob. And it's not only that. It's instead of having all these bills, all 12 appropriation bills, in one bill called an omnibus or a CR if it's extended, what we're going to do is we're going to pass each of these 12 bills independently, one by one, go through the proper committee process, then bring them up to the floor. So now when we have a fight, it's not about shutting down the government. We can fight on the issue that we're trying to address. And so we're able to bring up that Department of Homeland Security bill, appropriations bill, and have the fight there, try to block the president's action on immigration. And it doesn't threaten a government shutdown because you've got the 11 other bills, again, which we pass independently. That's the problem, is because the Democrats have not allowed us to follow regular order. When we go in and have a fight like that, then it becomes about shutting down the government rather than really addressing the issue that we're trying to address and solve.
That sounds familiar. Isn't that how it used to be done? I mean, didn't it?
Exactly. That's how it's always been done. That's called regular order, and that's what we have to go back to, as well as an open amendment process. That's what we're trying to do to try to make this place work again, and that's how it's always been done in the past.
We have a caller on the line for you, Senator. Renda's on hold, been waiting patiently. Go ahead. What's on your mind?
Yes, I'd just like to know why you didn't stop some funding in there for Obamacare, since the American people do not want it.
Because most of the funding for Obamacare is what's called a mandatory program. So what we were voting on is the one-third of the budget that is the discretionary portion. So we've tried to do what we can in the discretionary portion, but remember, the Democrats still have a majority, and the mandatory funding, which is the 2/3 of the funding that wasn't included in that part of the what we were voting on. It wasn't included in that bill. That continues. That's why after the first year, we've got to get enough votes, a majority, so we can work both on the appropriation side, the discretionary side, to try to reduce funding for Obamacare, and on the authorizing side, so we can try to repeal and replace. Now, the president will veto it. We will pass, if we can get enough Democrats in the Senate, we will pass repeal and replace. I think in any event the president vetoes it, but then we'll try to come back and make the changes that give us more competition, and more choice, and whittle away at it as best we can. But that's why, I'm sorry, it's kind of a long answer, but the mandatory, which is 2/3 of the budget, that wasn't included in that bill. That's not what that bill pertained to, and that's where the funding continues in Obamacare.
Okay, I just hope something can be done about it. My son.
But I'm with you. I'm going to try to repeal and replace, and we're going to try to do everything we can to create more choice, more competition, to repeal the medical device tax, to repeal the provisions of Obamacare that we can, and we'll stay after it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the call, Renda. Senator, final question. What's left for the Senate? I know you started off sort of listing out some of the items. When do you think the Senate's going to wrap up their business? When are you guys going to be done for the holiday?
Well, like I said, I'm going down there every day. The bill I'm trying to get passed is called the Tax Increase Prevention Act, and I'm determined we're going to get this before we're out of here. And so I'm going down every day to get that's the depreciation and the tax credit provisions for our small businesses and for our farmers. I don't know. I think it's possible that Senator Reid will drag it out closer to the end of the week, but we just don't know at this point.
Senator, thank you so much for your time.
You bet. Thanks, Rob.
I'm Rob.